I'm Anya, I'm 29, I'm female, and for the better part of a decade, my family has operated under the firm belief that I am their single greatest disappointment. To them, I am the cautionary tale they tell their friends, the aimless dreamer who crashed and burned, the daughter who still hasn't done anything worth mentioning. The truth, however, is a little different. The truth is that 2 days ago, I finalized the acquisition of Precision Dynamics, the mid-sized engineering firm that has been the central pillar of my family's life for over 30 years. The same firm where my father is a senior project manager and my golden child, older sister, is the head of regional marketing. They just don't know it yet. My story, or rather their story about me, began when I was 19. I was a sophomore in a prestigious business program on the exact track my father, Stellan, had mapped out for me. Stellan is a man who worships at the altar of stability. To him, life is a straight line. You get a good education, you get a safe job with a good pension, you work hard, and you retire with a gold watch and a sense of pride. His entire identity is wrapped up in the 30-plus years he's dedicated to precision dynamics. It's more than a job. It's his legacy, his proof that the straight and narrow path is the only one worth walking. My older sister, Lyra, is the living embodiment of his philosophy. She's 3 years older than me, and she never once stepped out of line. She got the right degree, landed an internship at Precision Dynamics before she even graduated, and has been climbing the corporate ladder there ever since. She is sharp, ambitious, and deeply committed to the family narrative. In our family, Lyra is the sun, and for a long time I was just a planet caught in her orbit, expected to follow the same gravitational pull. But I had a different idea. I saw the world changing. While my professors lectured about 100-year-old business models, I was spending my nights learning to code, fascinated by the burgeoning world of tech startups. I saw a future that wasn't about pensions and corner offices, but about innovation and building something from nothing. So I did the unthinkable. In the middle of my sophomore year, I dropped out of college to co-found a small software company with two friends. To say my family reacted poorly would be a gross understatement. It was a betrayal of everything they stood for. Stellan looked at me with a kind of bewildered pity, as if I'd just announced I was joining the circus. "Anya, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You're throwing away a guaranteed future for a fantasy. These internet things, they aren't real jobs." Lyra was worse. She was almost gleeful in her condescension. "I don't get it, Anya," she said, flipping through a marketing report for Precision Dynamics at the dinner table. "Why would you choose to struggle when you have it so easy? Dad and I work hard for our careers, you just seem to want a shortcut." Their words hurt, but I was fueled by the conviction of youth. I believed in my project. We were developing a new kind of organizational software, and for a while it felt like we were on the verge of a breakthrough. But we were young, inexperienced, and underfunded. After a year of burning through our meager savings, we were on the brink of collapse. That's when I made the mistake that would define my family's perception of me for the next 5 years. I went to my father and asked for a loan. It wasn't for me, it was to make payroll for the 3 employees we'd managed to hire. I had a detailed plan to pay it back within 6 months, showing him the venture capital meetings we had lined up. I wasn't asking for a handout, I was asking for a bridge. Stellan didn't even look at my proposal. He leaned back in his leather armchair, the one he bought himself after his 20th anniversary at Precision Dynamics, and gave me a long, weary sigh. "Anya," he began, and I knew from his tone that it was hopeless. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The real world isn't a game. It has consequences. You made your choice when you threw away your education. I cannot in good conscience throw good money after a bad decision. You need to learn a lesson in real-world responsibility." He said no. I walked out of his house that day feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. The startup folded a week later, but the humiliation didn't end there. Lyra, my own sister, took that private, painful moment and turned it into a public spectacle. She told everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, that I had come to Dad begging for a handout to fund my little hobby. The story morphed and grew with each telling. Soon the narrative was set in stone. Anya, the irresponsible dreamer, had failed and come crawling back, only to be rightfully denied. That single event became the source of the family's favorite jab, the one they'd trot out at every gathering: "At Lee's." She didn't ask for money this time. The years that followed were quiet ones for me, at least on the surface. I didn't crawl back. I got a simple job waiting tables, lived in a tiny apartment, and fell off the family's social radar. They assumed I was drifting, a lost cause. What they didn't see was the fire that rejection had lit in me. Every night after my shift, I wasn't watching TV, I was studying. I devoured books on finance, investment strategies, and market analysis. I taught myself advanced coding languages. The failure of my first company wasn't an end. It was the most expensive and valuable education I could have ever received. 2 years after asking my father for that loan, I used my small savings to make a few tiny strategic investments in emerging tech. One of them paid off. It wasn't a lottery win, it was a calculated risk that worked. I rolled that profit into another, then another. I started doing freelance consulting for tech firms, building a reputation not on a fancy degree but on tangible results. Within 4 years, I had quietly built my own private investment firm. I operated under a nondescript company name, keeping my own name out of the headlines. My success was my own, a secret I guarded fiercely. It was a fortress I built brick by brick, while my family was still gossiping about the ruins of my first attempt. They, of course, saw none of this. Their view of me was frozen in time. I'll never forget Lyra's promotion party 2 years ago. She had just been made head of regional marketing, a significant achievement. Our entire family was gathered in her pristine, beige-toned living room. Stellan stood up to make a toast, his chest puffed out with pride. He raised his champagne flute. To Lyra, he said, beaming, to a daughter who understood the value of hard work and dedication, she made us proud by getting a real degree and building a real career. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room before landing on me standing awkwardly by the appetizer table. It just goes to show that a real job and a real degree are what matter in life, not chasing fantasies. The room was silent for a beat too long. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. Lyra just smiled, a tight, triumphant little smile. I felt the familiar heat of shame rise in my cheeks, but this time something else was mixed in with it, a cold, hard resolve. I didn't say anything. I just raised my glass of water and took a sip, my mind a million miles away, already calculating the next acquisition for my firm. Their casual cruelty became a ritual. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, Stellan would fix me with his paternal, disappointed gaze and ask, in front of the whole family, "So, Anya, have you decided to get a real job yet?" Each time, Lyra would chime in with a helpful suggestion like, the mailroom at Precision is always hiring. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. They had no idea that my fantasy was now worth more than the entire marketing department Lyra managed. They had no idea that while they were pitying me, I was meeting with CEOs and negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. And they certainly had no idea that for the past 6 months, I had been in careful, confidential negotiations to do the one thing I knew would change the dynamic forever. I was buying Precision Dynamics. It wasn't just a business decision. It was the only move I had left to make. It was the only way to rewrite the story they had written for me. The invitation arrived, as it always did, via a group email from a distant aunt. It was a cheerful, clip-art-laden announcement for the annual family reunion. This year it was to be held at the Oak Valley Community Hall, a place that reeked of stale coffee and decades of forced merriment. For the past 4 years, I had politely declined. I always had an excuse, a prior commitment, a work project, a sudden, vague illness. The truth was, I simply couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the thought of another afternoon spent enduring the sympathetic head tilts, the thinly veiled insults, and the suffocating weight of my family's collective disappointment. But this year was different. When the email landed in my inbox, my finger hovered over the delete button, but I hesitated. 2 days prior, I had spent 10 hours in a sterile boardroom with my legal team, signing the final documents that transferred full ownership of Precision Dynamics to my investment firm, an entity my family didn't even know existed. The news was still private, slated for an official corporate announcement the following Monday. For now, it was a secret I held close, a massive, earth-shattering reality that existed only in my world. As I stared at the invitation, a text message from Lyra buzzed on my phone. "Hope you're coming to the reunion this year," it read, punctuated with a smiley face emoji that felt more like a sneer. "It would be nice for you to see everyone, no need to bring in." A thing just yourself. Another buzz, this time from my father, Stellan. His was more direct. Anya, your aunt expects a reply. We are all hoping you'll make an effort this time. An effort, that's what they called it. To them, my presence was a performance of familial duty, a box to be checked. My absence was just another sign of my waywardness, my inability to participate in normal family life. They didn't see it as an act of self-preservation. They couldn't comprehend that sitting at a table with them, listening to their endless praise of Lyra and their equally endless pity for me felt like slowly being ground down to dust. I leaned back in my chair, the plush leather of my office a stark contrast to the flimsy folding chairs I knew awaited me at the community hall. My office overlooked the city skyline, a glittering panorama of steel and glass that I had fought tooth and nail to earn a place in. Down below, 20 floors down, was the world my family inhabited, a world of cubicles, commutes, and the comfortable certainty of a bi-weekly paycheck from Precision Dynamics. Precision Dynamics, for my father, it was the bedrock of his existence. He spoke of the company with a reverence usually reserved for a place of worship. He had started in the warehouse and worked his way up to senior project manager through sheer, plodding persistence. He knew the name of every machine on the factory floor and every clause in the employee handbook. His greatest fear was change, his greatest pride was his loyalty to the company. For Lyra, the company was a stage. It was where she proved her worth, outshining her colleagues and earning the promotions that served as testament to her superiority. She loved the structure, the hierarchy, the clear and visible markers of success. She would often talk about her strategic initiatives and brand synergy, using corporate jargon as both a shield and a weapon. For me, Precision Dynamics had always been a symbol of the life I had rejected. It was the real world they constantly threw in my face. It was stable, respectable, and in my view, profoundly boring. But as I began my due diligence for the acquisition, I saw it differently. I saw untapped potential, outdated systems ripe for innovation, and a solid, dependable workforce that was being held back by a risk-averse management culture, a culture personified by my father. Buying it wasn't just a personal move, it was a sound business decision. It was a classic, undervalued asset. But I couldn't deny the personal element. The irony was so thick I could taste it. For years, they had used the company as a yardstick to measure my failure. Now I own the yardstick. I typed out a reply to Lyra, "Sounds great, I'll be there." Her response came back instantly. "Wow, that's great news. So glad you're finally making the effort. Dad will be thrilled." Thrilled? I doubted that. He would be pleased that I was conforming, that I was finally bending to the gravitational pull of the family. He would see it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to give up my fantasies and beg Lyra for a job in the mailroom. The days leading up to the reunion were a strange whirlwind. By day, I was the new unseen owner of a multi-million-dollar company, strategizing with my transition team, reviewing personnel files, and outlining a new vision for the future of Precision Dynamics. The files for Stellan and Lyra landed on my desk. I looked at them for a long time. Stellan's was a portrait of consistency, 32 years of service, satisfactory performance reviews, noted for his reliability. Lyra S. was a picture of ambition, glowing reviews, rapid promotions, but with recurring notes from colleagues about her being difficult to collaborate with and overly competitive. It was all there in black and white, the family dynamic playing out in corporate performance metrics. By night, I was just Anya, the daughter preparing for a family get-together. I called my mom, who was the perpetually neutral party in our family conflicts. She was a gentle soul who avoided confrontation at all costs, acting as a reluctant buffer between Stellan's rigid disappointment and my quiet defiance. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," she said, her voice filled with genuine relief when I told her I was coming. "Your father and Lyra will be so happy. It's so important for us all to be together." I knew she meant well, but her words highlighted the chasm between their perception and my reality. They weren't happy for me. They were happy that the family unit would appear whole, unbroken. My attendance was about maintaining the illusion. On the morning of the reunion, I stood in front of my closet, a place filled with sharp business attire, and felt a moment of uncertainty. What does one wear to casually announce that they've bought their family's company? I settled on a simple, elegant outfit, dark trousers, a silk blouse, and a well-tailored black jacket. Underneath the jacket, I wore a simple white t-shirt. It was blank for now, but I had a plan. I had the official logo of Precision Dynamics, a stylized gear intersecting with a circuit board custom printed onto it. The shirt felt like a piece of armor. As I drove towards Oak Valley, my phone buzzed again. It was a photo from Lyra sent to a family group chat. It was a selfie of her and Stellan, both of them wearing matching polo shirts embroidered with the Precision Dynamics logo. It was from the company's family day last summer. The caption read, "Getting ready for the reunion, so proud to be part of the PD family, Team Precision." I looked at the photo at their beaming, proud faces. They were so secure in their world, so certain of their place in it. They saw that logo as a badge of honor, a symbol of their success and stability. They had no idea that the ownership of that symbol and the world it represented now rested in my hands. The final straw hadn't been one single event. It had been 1,000 tiny cuts, a decade of being misunderstood and underestimated. And as I pulled into the crowded parking lot of the community hall, I knew that today wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about finally, definitively, ending their story and starting my own. The Oak Valley Community Hall was exactly as I remembered it. A cavernous, beige room with fluorescent lights that hummed with a weary institutional buzz. The air was thick with the competing smells of catered barbecue, cheap perfume, and the faint, dusty scent of a place that is only ever used for events like this. Folding tables covered in paper tablecloths were arranged in neat rows, and a banner hand-painted with the family name, Annual Reunion, drooped slightly in the middle, held up by yellowing tape. I took a deep breath before stepping through the door, my jacket buttoned, concealing the secret I wore beneath. The moment I entered, the noise level seemed to drop for a fraction of a second. Heads turned. It was the subtle, almost imperceptible shift that happens when the subject of gossip walks into a room. I saw my Aunt Carol nudge my Uncle Mike, their whispered conversation cut short as I approached. "Anya, you made it," Aunt Carol chirped, her smile a little too bright, a little too forced. "We were so worried you wouldn't come." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, my own smile feeling just as artificial. My mother spotted me from across the room and rushed over, enveloping me in a hug that was equal parts affection and relief. "Oh, I'm so glad you're here, honey," she whispered, squeezing my arm. "Everyone's been asking about you." I knew what asking about you meant. It was code for validating the family narrative. They were asking if I'd gotten a real job yet, or if I was still living in that tiny apartment. Their questions weren't born of genuine concern, but of a morbid curiosity, the kind people have when they slow down to look at a car wreck. Then I saw them. Stellan and Lyra were holding court near the drinks table, standing shoulder to shoulder. My father was in his element, regaling a small circle of relatives with a story about a production challenge at the factory. He used his hands as he spoke, gesturing with an air of authority, the senior project manager in his natural habitat. Lyra stood beside him, nodding along, a proprietary smile on her face. She looked polished and perfect in a sharp, professional dress, the absolute image of corporate success. As I drew closer, their conversation faltered. Stellan turned and his eyes met mine. For a moment, his expression was unreadable, but then it settled into his familiar look of paternal disappointment, softened slightly by the public setting. "Anya," he said, his voice a low rumble, "good of you to come." It wasn't a welcome, it was an acknowledgement of my compliance. "Of course, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone light and even. Lyra's greeting was dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Anya, you look nice," she said, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of my simple outfit. The subtext was clear, you actually put some effort in for once. "Everyone, look who decided to grace us with her presence." The relatives around them offered a chorus of polite hellos. I could feel their eyes on me, searching for cracks in my facade, for any sign of the failure they'd been told to expect. I just smiled, a calm, placid smile that I had perfected over years of enduring these moments. My heart was beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. The nervousness I expected to feel was absent, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. I felt like an actor in the final scene of a play, a play where I was the only one who knew how it was going to end. I spent the next hour drifting through the reunion like a ghost. I made small talk with cousins I hadn't seen in years, answered vague questions about my work with even vaguer answers. I'm in consulting. I manage a few projects and accept deep plates of food I had no intention of eating. The entire event was a shrine to precision dynamics. It felt like every other conversation I overheard was about the company. My uncle Mike, who worked in logistics at the firm, was complaining about a new inventory system. My cousin Sarah, a recent hire in accounting, was talking about the company's 401k plan. They spoke about it with a sense of ownership, of shared identity. It was the family business in every way but name. I found a quiet corner and watched them. I saw my father clap Uncle Mike on the back, assuring him he'd talk to the guys in it about the inventory system. I saw Lyra giving career advice to Sarah, her tone patronizingly helpful. They were so embedded, so deeply woven into the fabric of this company. Their identities were inextricably linked to their employee ID numbers. Lyra eventually sought me out, a plate of potato salad in her hand. So, she began, taking a seat next to me, I was thinking, since you're here and making an effort, maybe it's time you thought seriously about your future. I just looked at her, waiting. I know things have been tough for you, she continued, her voice full of faux sympathy. But I might be able to help. I have a lot of pull in the marketing department. I can't promise anything, of course, but I could probably get your resume on the right desk for an entry-level assistant position. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be a start. A real job, what do you think? She was offering me crumbs from the table, a chance to work in the mailroom-adjacent world she had always envisioned for me. She saw it as an act of immense generosity, a lifeline thrown to her drowning younger sister. The offer was so perfectly condescending, so completely in character that I almost laughed. Thanks, Lyra, I said, my voice betraying none of the swirling emotions inside me. I'll keep that in mind. Her smile tightened. My calm refusal to grovel for her offer seemed to annoy her. Well, don't wait too long, she said, standing up. Opportunities like this don't come around forever. As she walked away, I felt a final, definitive click inside my mind. Any lingering doubt, any thought of just letting this go and walking away evaporated. She had just tried to leverage her power at a company I now own to offer me a job. The absurdity of it was staggering. The time for the main toast was drawing near. My aunt began clinking a fork against a glass, calling for everyone's attention. A hush fell over the beige room. My father, Stellan, moved to the front, beaming. This was his favorite part of the reunion, the patriarch's address. He loved to stand before the family, a symbol of stability and wisdom, and impart his yearly message. My heart, which had been so steady, began to beat a little faster. The show was about to begin. Stellan stood at the head of the room, his posture straight, his expression radiating a kind of benevolent authority. He loved moments like this, moments where he was the undisputed center of the family's universe. He cleared his throat, and the last of the murmuring conversations died down. Every eye in the hall was on him. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice resonating with practiced confidence. It does my heart good to see everyone together. Family is the most important thing. It's about support, about being there for each other, about celebrating our successes. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the faces looking up at him. He smiled warmly at my mother, gave a proud nod towards Lyra, and then his eyes found me standing near the back of the room. As his eyes settled on me, the warmth in his expression flickered, replaced by that familiar, weary look of disappointment. It was a look I knew as well as my own reflection. And we have a lot to celebrate this year, he continued, raising his glass of iced tea. Lyra continues to do incredible things at the company. Her latest marketing campaign was a huge success. We're all so proud of her. A smattering of applause broke out. Lyra, seated near the front, practically glowed with pride, giving a small, queenly wave. I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped in front of me. My jacket felt heavy on my shoulders. I was acutely aware of the custom-printed shirt beneath it, a secret waiting to be told. Stellan let the applause die down before continuing. Success is about dedication. It's about knowing what you want and following a steady path to get there. It's about contributing, about making your mark, about doing something worthwhile. He took another deliberate pause, and I knew what was coming next. He was building up to it, laying the groundwork for his annual public shaming. It was a ritual as predictable as the changing of the seasons. So let's raise a glass, he said, his voice taking on a slightly more pointed tone. He looked directly at me now, and there was no mistaking the intent. He was making an example of me. Let's toast to the kid who still hasn't done anything worth mentioning. A wave of uncomfortable silence washed over the room. It was thick and suffocating. A few people coughed, some looked down at their plates, others shot me quick, pitying glances. The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. In that moment, I wasn't his daughter, I was his prop, a cautionary tale used to make his other daughter shine brighter. The sting was sharp, but it was also strangely distant, like watching a scene from a movie I had seen 100 times before. But then Lyra, never one to be outdone, decided to add her own flourish. She stood up, raising her own glass with a theatrical sigh. "Well, Dad," she said, her voice laced with false charity, "at least she showed up without asking for money this time." That did it. A few of the closer relatives, the ones who had fully bought into the narrative, let out a few nervous, sycophantic chuckles. The second blow, delivered so swiftly after the first, was designed to be the final, crushing humiliation. It was the punchline to a joke that had been 5 years in the making. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not in a sad way, not in a way that made me want to cry or run out of the room. It was the clean, sharp snap of a chain that had been holding me down for a decade. The weight was just gone. So I laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter, it was a genuine, full-throated laugh. It started deep in my chest and bubbled up, clear and loud in the silent, awkward room. Everyone stared at me. My laughter was so unexpected, so completely contrary to the reaction they anticipated, that it threw them completely off balance. Stellan's confident smirk faltered. Lyra's triumphant expression curdled into confusion. My laugh subsided and a serene calm settled over me. I took a step forward, out of the corner I had been relegated to. Every eye was on me. "You know what, Dad, you're right," I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying easily through the hall. "I think a toast is a great idea." I walked slowly toward the front of the room, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. The crowd of relatives parted for me like the Red Sea. I stopped when I was standing right next to Stellan and Lyra. I could see the confusion warring with anger in my father's eyes. Lyra just looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You're right," I repeated, looking directly at my father. "I haven't done much that's worth mentioning." I let that word hang in the air for a second. "I've been a little busy with a new project, a pretty big one actually. It's taken up a lot of my time for the last 6 months." I turned my gaze to Lyra. "And you're right too, Lyra, I didn't show up asking for money." I gave her a small, knowing smile. "It turns out my finances have improved quite a bit since the last time we spoke about them." I could feel the tension in the room ratcheting up to an unbearable level. They were all holding their breath, waiting for the punchline. My mother looked terrified, her hand over her mouth. Then slowly and deliberately, I reached up and unbuttoned my black jacket. I shrugged it off my shoulders and let it fall into the crook of my arm. And there it was, revealed for all to see. The logo printed on my white t-shirt, the stylized gear intersecting with a circuit board, the official, unmistakable logo of Precision Dynamics. I looked back at my father, whose face had gone completely pale. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide with utter, uncomprehending shock. Lyra's face was a mask of disbelief. She stared at the logo on my shirt, then back at my face, her mind clearly unable to process what she was seeing. I let the silence stretch for another few seconds, letting the image sink in. Then I addressed the entire room. "I just laughed," I said, my voice calm and even, "because I found it funny that you wanted to toast my lack of accomplishments on the same weekend that I finalized the acquisition of the company you all work for. My name is Anya, and as of 48 hours ago, I am the new owner of Precision Dynamics." The silence that followed my announcement was absolute. It was a dense, heavy vacuum that sucked all the air out of the room. The cheerful, hand-painted banner seemed to mock the stunned stillness of the crowd. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if I had pressed a universal pause button. Then the silence shattered. It wasn't with a bang, but with a wave of confused, incredulous murmurs that rippled through the gathered relatives. What did she say? Is she serious? That's not possible. But all I could focus on were the two people standing beside me. My father, Stellan, was ashen. The confident patriarch who had commanded the room just moments before had vanished, replaced by a man who looked utterly lost. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. His eyes, wide with shock, darted from the logo on my shirt to my face as if trying to solve an impossible equation. The glass of iced tea he was holding trembled in his hand, the ice cubes clinking softly against the sides. Lyra's reaction was different. Her disbelief was quickly hardening into furious denial. Her face, which had been pale with shock, was now flushed with a deep, blotchy red. "That's not funny, Anya," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "That is not funny at all. What is this? Some kind of sick joke?" "It's not a joke, Lyra," I said calmly, my voice unwavering. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful, I just felt quiet. The storm that had been raging inside me for years had finally passed, leaving a strange and profound stillness in its wake. "You're lying," she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "You can't be, you don't have any money, you're a failure, Dad, tell her to stop." She turned to Stellan for support, but he was unreachable, lost in his own world of shock. He was staring into the middle distance, the entire foundation of his world crumbling around him. The company he had dedicated his life to, the symbol of his stability and success, the very yardstick he used to measure his own worth and my lack thereof, it was now owned by the person he pitied most. My Uncle Mike, the logistics manager, was the first to break the spell. He took a hesitant step forward. "Anya, what is she talking about, Stellan? Is this for real?" Before my father could answer, I did. "It is, Uncle Mike," I said, turning to face him. "The deal was finalized on Friday. The official announcement to the staff and the press is scheduled for Monday morning." The detailed, corporate nature of my answer seemed to lend it an undeniable weight. This wasn't a vague fantasy. It was a fact, complete with a timeline. The murmurs in the room began to change from disbelief to stunned acceptance. Lyra, however, was not ready to accept it. "Prove it," she demanded, her eyes flashing with a desperate anger. "You can't just walk in here with a t-shirt you probably had made at the mall and expect us to believe this nonsense." I had anticipated this. I reached into my trouser pocket and pulled out my phone. With a few taps, I pulled up an email. It was a summary of the final acquisition agreement from my lead counsel, sent just after the signing. I didn't show her the whole thing, that was confidential, but I turned the screen so she could see the subject line and the opening paragraph. "From the desk of Thomas Crandall, lead counsel, Blackwood Capital," I read aloud. "RE, finalization of Project Chimera acquisition of Precision Dynamics, Inc. Dear Ms. My last name, congratulations on the successful closing of the acquisition." Lyra stared at the screen, her face contorting as she read the words. The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once, replaced by a look of horrified comprehension. She stumbled back a step as if the phone itself had physically pushed her. "Blackwood Capital," she whispered, the name barely audible. "They're a huge investment firm. We've been hearing rumors for months that someone was buying us out, but we thought it was a competitor." "Blackwood Capital is my firm," I said simply. "I founded it 6 years ago." That was the final blow. The knowledge that my success wasn't a fluke, not a lottery win, but the result of years of work she knew nothing about, completely shattered her reality. The little sister she pitied, the failure she offered an entry-level job to, was a titan of an industry she couldn't even comprehend. Suddenly, my father seemed to come back to life. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of emotions. Confusion, betrayal, fear, and something I couldn't quite name, a dawning, horrified respect. "How," he croaked, his voice raspy, "how is this possible? We would have known." "You didn't know because I didn't tell you," I said, my voice softening slightly. You made it very clear a long time ago how you felt about my fantasies, so I decided to pursue them on my own. The reunion was over. The festive atmosphere had completely evaporated, replaced by a tense, awkward pall. People started to quietly pack up their things, avoiding eye contact with me, with Stellan, with Lyra. They were caught in the blast radius of a family drama that had just gone nuclear, and all they wanted to do was escape. My mother came over to me, her face pale and her eyes filled with tears. Anya, she whispered, her hand fluttering at her chest. Is it true, all of it? I nodded, yes, Mom, it's true. She looked from me to her husband and her other daughter, who were now standing together like two survivors of a shipwreck, and she started to quietly weep. She wasn't weeping with joy or with pride. She was weeping for the family that had been, for the comfortable lies that had just been torn apart. Stellan and Lyra approached me one last time before they left. They stood before me not as a father and sister, but as two defeated strangers. There's a company-wide town hall meeting on Monday at 9 a.m., I said, my voice slipping into the professional, authoritative tone of a CEO. I'll be laying out my vision for the future of the company. I expect you both to be there. They didn't respond. They just turned and walked away, their shoulders slumped in defeat. As I watched them go, I felt no joy, no thrill of victory, only a vast, empty sense of relief. The war was over, and in the quiet aftermath, I was finally free. Monday morning arrived with a cool, clinical clarity. The sky outside my office window was a crisp, cloudless blue. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. My transition team, a small group of my most trusted analysts and managers from Blackwood Capital, had been working through the weekend to ensure a smooth handover. Today was the day the new reality would be cemented, not just for my family, but for all 400 employees of Precision Dynamics. I dressed with meticulous care in a dark gray suit, a symbol of the authority I now wielded. There was no custom t-shirt today, no dramatic reveal. Today was not about family drama, it was about corporate leadership. As I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I saw not the daughter or the sister, but the founder and CEO. The two identities, which had been at war for so long, had finally integrated into one. The drive to the Precision Dynamics headquarters felt different. I had driven past this sprawling, low-slung brick building hundreds of times in my life, first as a child when my dad would take me to the company picnic, and later as a young adult, viewing it as a symbol of the life I was running from. Today, I drove through the main gates not as a visitor, but as the owner. The security guard, a man who had probably waved my father through for 20 years, looked at my ID, then at a memo on his clipboard, and his eyes widened in surprise before he nodded and raised the barrier. "Welcome, ma'am," he said, his voice tinged with awe. The town hall was being held in the main cafeteria, the only space large enough to hold everyone. As I walked through the corridors, escorted by the outgoing CEO who was staying on for a week to help with the transition, I could feel the nervous energy in the air. The news had clearly leaked. The whispers and stunned looks from employees I passed confirmed it. The grapevine at a place like Precision Dynamics was brutally efficient. When I stepped onto the temporary stage set up at the front of the cafeteria, a hush fell over the packed room. 400 faces stared up at me, a sea of curiosity, anxiety, and skepticism. I scanned the crowd, and it didn't take me long to find them. Stellan and Lyra were standing together near the back, pushed up against the wall as if seeking safety from the crowd. They looked exhausted. My father's posture was stooped, all the proud rigidity gone from his shoulders. He looked older than he had on Saturday. Lyra stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face a mask of sullen resentment. They weren't looking at me. They were staring at their shoes, at the floor, anywhere but at the stage where their daughter and sister was about to decide their future. They were no longer patriarch and golden child. In this room, they were just two employees among hundreds waiting to hear from their new boss. I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady through the microphone. "My name is Anya, and I am the founder of Blackwood Capital. As of last Friday, Blackwood Capital is the new parent company of Precision Dynamics." I let that sink in before continuing. I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the room right now. Change can be unsettling. I want to be as transparent as possible about what this means for all of you and for the future of this company. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out my vision. I spoke not of mass layoffs or radical cuts, but of investment and innovation. I talked about upgrading their outdated technology, about streamlining their inefficient processes, and about expanding into new markets they had been too risk-averse to explore. I spoke of empowering the talented engineers and designers on their staff, of fostering a culture of creativity rather than just compliance. Precision Dynamics has a proud history and a solid foundation, I said, making eye contact with people in the crowd. My goal is not to tear that down, it's to build upon it, to take the stability and reliability this company is known for and infuse it with the agility and forward thinking of a modern tech firm. I spoke with a passion and a depth of knowledge that I knew would surprise them. This wasn't the work of a detached, faceless investor. This was the work of someone who had spent years studying the market, who understood the industry inside and out. I was not the aimless failure from my family's story. I was a competent, decisive leader, and I was proving it to them with every word. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father finally look up. He was watching me, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. It was the look of a man seeing someone for the very first time. He wasn't seeing his disappointing daughter on that stage. He was seeing a stranger, a powerful and articulate executive who was, impossibly, wearing his daughter's face. I opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up across the room. The questions were tough and direct. Would there be layoffs? What about their pensions? What did I know about engineering? I answered each one calmly and honestly, providing detailed, well-reasoned responses. With every answer, I could feel the tension in the room begin to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. Then a hand went up in the back. It was Lyra's. The room went silent. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone knew she was my sister. My heart gave a single, hard thud. I nodded at her, yes. You've talked a lot about innovation, she said, her voice tight but professional. She was performing for her colleagues, trying to regain some semblance of her former status. The marketing department has been underfunded for years. How can you expect to expand into new markets without a significant increase in our budget to support brand outreach? It was a test, a challenge disguised as a legitimate question. She was putting me on the spot, trying to assert her old authority. I met her gaze. That's an excellent question, I said, my tone even. You're right, marketing is crucial. However, my initial analysis shows that the primary issue isn't a lack of funding, but a lack of efficiency in how the current budget is spent. The focus has been on outdated traditional outreach methods with a low return on investment. Before we talk about increasing the budget, I want to see a new proposal based on modern, data-driven digital marketing strategies. I'll be scheduling a full review with the head of each department starting this week. I look forward to seeing what you come up with, Ms. My last name. I used our family name, but in this context, it was a corporate formality. I had answered her question, validated her department's importance, and simultaneously asserted my authority and expertise, all without a hint of personal animosity. Lyra's face fell. She had expected a fight, a personal jab. Instead, she got a perfectly professional, unassailable corporate response. She slowly lowered her hand and said nothing more. When the town hall ended, it was to a smattering of genuine applause. As the employees filed out, many of them were talking with an energy I hadn't seen when I walked in. They were hopeful. I watched as Stellan and Lyra were swept up in the exiting crowd. They didn't look back. The new reality had set in. I was their boss. Their professional lives were in my hands. The old power dynamic had not just been flipped, it had been obliterated. And in its place was a new, clear, and unbreachable professional boundary. The week following the town hall was a blur of meetings, strategic planning, and the immense logistical effort of taking the helm of a company. I met with every department head, including Lyra. Our meeting was stiff and formal. She presented her department's current strategy, and I listened patiently before giving her a list of directives for the new proposal I expected. I was firm, fair, and completely impersonal. I treated her exactly as I would any other marketing director. There was no hint of our shared history in my voice or my demeanor. For Lyra, who was used to her status as the golden child, being treated as just another employee by her own sister was a quiet but profound form of torture. She left my new office, the former CEO's office, looking pale and diminished. My meeting with my father never happened. He sent an email to my new assistant the day after the town hall requesting a meeting, but a few hours later he canceled it, and the next day an email from Human Resources landed in my inbox. Subject, resignation. Stellan, my last name. He had retired, effective immediately. After 32 years of service, he didn't want a gold watch or a farewell party. He just left. He couldn't handle the new reality. He couldn't work for his daughter, the failure he had so publicly pitied. His pride, the very thing that had fueled his disdain for me, wouldn't allow it. His departure sent a quiet shockwave through the company, but the work continued. I didn't reach out to him. The ball was in his court. The professional boundary had been drawn, and now the personal one had to be rebuilt if it was even possible. 2 weeks after the reunion, my mother called me. "Can you come over for dinner?" she asked, her voice small and tired. "Just us." I knew this was it. I agreed. That evening, I walked into the house I grew up in. It felt smaller than I remembered. Why Mother hugged me at the door, her hug lingering a little too long. Stellan was in the living room, sitting in his armchair. He looked like a king who had lost his throne. The air was thick with unspoken words. We ate dinner in near silence. My mother tried to fill the void with small talk about the weather and her garden, but her efforts were futile. Finally, as we cleared the plates, my father spoke. "Your mother tells me you're changing everything at the company," he said, not looking at me. He was staring at the wood grain of the dining tables. "I'm updating things, Dad," I replied softly. "I'm trying to make it stronger." He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with a raw, painful confusion. "Why didn't you tell us, Anya? All those years, we thought you were struggling." "You never asked," I said, the words coming out without any of the anger I once felt. They were just a statement of fact. "You didn't want to hear about my life. You wanted me to live your life. Every time I saw you, you told me I was a failure. You and Lyra made it a joke. Why would I share my success with people who were so invested in my failure?" He had no answer to that. He just shook his head slowly. "I don't understand your world," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The stocks, the investments, it's like a foreign language to me. I only understand working hard for a paycheck, building something real with your hands." "I did build something real, Dad," I said. "I just used a keyboard instead of a hammer. It was hard work. It was a different kind of work." For the first time, I think he heard me. He didn't fully understand, but he heard the truth in my voice. There was no apology. He wasn't capable of it, not really. The damage went too deep. But in his eyes, I saw the hard shell of his pride begin to crack. He was looking at his daughter and seeing not a disappointment, but a formidable stranger he had completely misjudged. "Lyra is still at Precision Dynamics. She's a good marketing director, and I am a fair boss. Our relationship is now purely professional. The sisterly bond we once had is gone, replaced by a carefully maintained corporate distance. Maybe one day that will change, but for now it's what's necessary. She has to earn my respect professionally, and perhaps in doing so, we might find a new, different kind of personal respect." My victory wasn't the moment I revealed the logo. It wasn't seeing the shock on their faces or taking over the company. The real victory is the peace I feel now. I spent a decade letting their opinion of me be the sun in my sky, a scorching star that I was constantly trying to please or escape. Now their opinions are just opinions. They no longer have the power to burn me. I am the center of my own universe, powered by my own accomplishments. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for me. I did it to finally close the book on the story they wrote about me, a story filled with pity and condescension. And now the pages are blank, and for the first time in my life, I am the one holding the pen. So I have to ask you, the audience, what would you have done? Would you have kept your success a secret and simply enjoyed it in private, freeing yourself from their judgment without a confrontation? Or was a public reveal, a moment of undeniable truth, the only way to truly break the cycle?